Custer, South Dakota is one of the most beautiful areas in America. It is in proximity to Mount Rushmore and Crazy Horse Monument, located in the heart of the Black Hills of South Dakota. Its beauty and intrigue is renowned, of which attracts thousands of tourists every year. The town of Custer is a small, peaceful village where the citizens are well acquainted. However, there is a noticeable stigma to bear in cognition when traveling through this area. The stigma, hence blight, is an overly aggressive sheriff department known for annually issuing a myriad of traffic citations to outsiders. Every time my wife and I drive through this area, we notice that some hapless tourist, hence outsider, is being pulled over by a sheriff's deputy and issued a traffic citation, hence a monetary fine. The number of deputies employed is high for such a small population base. This alone raises questions as to why. On the 18th of December, 2020, my wife was pulled over and issued a traffic citation in Custer, South Dakota. This video documentary is about the injustice of that unsettling encounter. Bear in mind that my wife was born and raised on a ranch in Custer County, and she attended high school in Custer and worked there for nearly 5 years afterward. The deputy that impetuously accused her of speeding is new to the area and a novice to law enforcement. My wife and I live within 100 miles of Custer, South Dakota, in the upper northwest corner of Nebraska. Naturally, we have a Nebraska, hence out-of-state, license plate on our vehicle, which obviously attracted the unwelcomed encounter with the newly hired deputy assigned to traffic patrol with the objective to garner revenue by the unscrupulous means of imposing traffic citations. I will refer to this inexorable deputy as Officer X to spare his family members of the reproach caused by his captious, hence vilifying behavior. Custer has no police department. It only has a sheriff's department. Very few highway patrolmen are seen patrolling in this area because it is heavily dominated by the Custer County Sheriff's Department. On Friday, December 18th, 2020, the COVID pandemic was in full swing with its shutdowns, which was undeniably evident in Custer, South Dakota. There were few cars on the highway. It was cold and had lightly snowed. The town of Custer was inactive. The school system was closed. My wife was driving our vehicle. I was the passenger. I was too tired at the time to drive on that day. My wife grew up in Custer County, and she is certainly familiar with the area. In addition, her father once owned and operated the school bus system that served its public schools. Many of her relatives still live there. We often gather there in the summer for family reunions. It was mid-morning, and we were heading north on the highway out of Custer. I asked my wife why she was driving ridiculously slow. She said that the current Custer County Sheriff Department bears ill repute for issuing traffic tickets, and it heavily patrols the area, obviously for revenue-grabbing purposes. She stated that she did not want to fall victim to its tyrannous extortion. Within seconds after her statement, we saw glaring blue and red lights pull up behind our vehicle. This patrol car was far from standard. It looked fake. It looked like it was slapped together by a thug in an abject ghetto. We were suspicious that a desperate criminal posing as a member of law enforcement was attempting to rob us. After all, the news stations commonly expose this problem, as you can clearly see in the pictured headlines. A man stepped out of the tawdry patrol car and approached our vehicle, and he started aggressively shouting that we were speeding. The tone of his voice was angry and accusatory, which implied that we dare not question his motive or the encounter would turn abusive. Take note that police abuse is commonly exposed by national news stations.
Did you ever coming up the hill out of town there?
Yeah.
That's a 25-mile-an-hour zone. I had you at 42 until you reached that sign right there. That's only a 35. You were doing 46. Can I see your license, registration, proof of insurance, please?
He completely hid his identity from us the entire time. We had no idea if he was a legitimate member of law enforcement or an impudent criminal. He did not ask us any questions, hence invite dialogue. He did not check to see if there were drugs or alcohol involved. His ignominious mission was strictly to impose a traffic citation, of which imposes a concomitant revenue-grabbing fine in an obvious speed trap zone, lacking speed limit signage. He handed us a vague, hence generic, traffic citation. His penmanship was so inferior that we could not decipher even his name. My wife wanted to challenge his false allegation accusing her of speeding. I advised her not to do so because he was a dangerous individual and a potential imposter. I told her to sign the ticket and state under her signature that she was reserving all rights and that we would challenge him in a court trial. That is, if he was a bona fide member of law enforcement. When my wife and I returned home, I called the Custer County Sheriff and made an oral complaint, and I fortified it with a written complaint. The sheriff defended the deputy and took umbrage to my complaint. I searched Officer X out on the internet and ascertained that he was a newly employed deputy with obviously a modicum of training, let alone experience. It was plain to deduce that his orders were to issue traffic citations and garner the revenue thereby to curry the favor of his boss and to secure his job by satiating the county coffer. Officer X offers little evidence for his speeding accusation. He had no dash cam video coverage to offer as evidence to substantiate his specious claim. The only video footage offered was recorded from his body cam. His spurious claim, hence accusation, is entirely ex parte, hence one-sided. He has no witnesses to verify it. He relied solely upon an antiquated radar speed measuring device to make his moot assessment. These units are 3 generations behind in technology and consequently prohibited as evidence in court trials in many states because of their many flaws. They will often give off a ghost reading for no reason. For example, when no vehicles are present, these machines will still render a speed reading. We will examine their infamous inaccuracies during the trial. The joining video footage that comes after Officer X's body cam footage was filmed by my cell phone, thus providing an opposing perspective to this dispute. This will bring a proper balance to the litigation and cogently provide reasonable doubt and likely procure an acquittal, hence a dismissal for my wife, who is the defendant in this case. She has standing, hence credibility. She has an unsullied driving record. Her level of education is near the doctoral level in education. She is a retired school teacher. She has a perfect police record. Logic suggests that her accuser, Officer X, lacks such virtue in juxtaposition. Officer X's body video footage shows that he captiously stalked our red minivan in a marauding, hence predatory manner on the highway north of Custer, South Dakota, where there are clearly no speed limit signs on the east side of the ascending highway to apprise unwitting northbound travelers of the unnatural, hence artificially slow speed limit of 25 miles per hour, which constitutes an insidious speed trap. Vulnerable travelers who are unfamiliar with this long stretch of highway are also confused by its varied surroundings. For example, this highway is wide and fecund with many distractions on both sides. For example, advertising billboards, a dense forest, and bustling logging trucks, to name a few. Custer County and South Dakota's Department of Transportation are responsible for this deficiency in speed guidance. Speed signs in this ambiguous area need to be salient and frequent to ensure recognition thereto. Without these essential guides, it makes this an insidious speed trap for the insidious and rapacious purposes of revenue grabbing, hence speed citations. Officer X knows that travelers from out of state and other towns are vulnerable within the perimeter of this obvious speed trap section of highway. Logic suggests that Officer X has nefariously issued a glut of traffic citations in this obscure area, having full knowledge of this vulnerability, which is appallingly unfair to the unwitting driver. It is the perfect speed trap area in which to exploit hapless travelers. It is clear to see on his body cam video that he is on the prowl and preemptively stalking us to accrue multiple infractions for the sole purpose of revenue grabbing. Take note that even if a slight disparity of speed was at play, that it still posed no risk to anybody on a sparsely traveled, hence desolate highway. In conclusion, hence recapitulation, let us examine the events that manifested that day. Officer X was marauding in hunt of a potential citation candidate, and with untold thousands of rules, regulations, codes, and ephemeral policies at his disposal from which to choose. Bear in mind that even Officer X, the sheriff, the county attorney, the judge, and the most adept rule makers, let alone driving instructors, are incapable of keeping them all. In fact, they inadvertently contravene them constantly. Is it not strange that they are rarely called into accountability for their infractions? This constitutes a double standard. This unsettling fact makes it impossible for the average citizen to leave such a heavily patrolled area unscathed. It is only a matter of minutes or seconds that one of the thousands of minor rules is contravened. Each traffic citation, hence infraction, averages in cost to equate to 2 days worth of sweat equity labor, hence wages, to satisfy the draconian fine, which is irrefutably the crime of extortion. Number 2. Officer X approaches our vehicle, positioning himself out of view of the driver's window, thus insidiously hiding his identity. His voice is noticeably curt, assertive, accusatory, and demanding. He extends no benign opportunity for dialogue. His ignoble intention is clear. He is going to inexorably issue a speeding citation, hence a draconian fine, for the avarice purpose of revenue grabbing, using the color of law as a beguiling excuse, which is a felony described in Black's Law Dictionary. The tenor of his voice is robotic and menacing, which is rehearsed via repetition. He has obviously developed a habitual pattern of this chicanery, hence an unethical modus operandi. My wife and I felt threatened by his presence under such inauspicious circumstances. The feeling was visceral. Bear in mind that during this traffic stop, the ambient sounds were loud, and periodically a passing vehicle drove by, making his barely audible vocal rants impossible to hear, hence understand. Regardless, we did not pose any threat to Officer X, and he did take notice of that fact before his departure, as he lightened his tone at the end. Take into consideration that the microphone on his Precision 4K body cam records his voice in high fidelity because it is acting as a lapel microphone placed close to his mouth. However, we heard no such vocal clarity in our vehicle, which was imprudent, pusillanimous, hence poor judgment on Officer X's behalf, of which precipitated a complaint against him in addition to a litigation. My wife will undergo the trial in an attempt to procure justice from this unfair and unsettling encounter. We hope that the court does not prove itself as an accomplice that invariably sides with law enforcement, which is referred to as a kangaroo court, a Machiavellian artifice common in today's opprobrious, hence fraudulent society. An investigation needs to be effectuated to ascertain if the Custer County Sheriff Department is guilty of revenue grabbing via traffic citations.